The noise of the car grew louder. The beetle was half across the road. Ben thought, if I do not stop the car, the beetle will be crushed. But if I do stop the car and it is full of people, Illico will be angry. Who cares? I will stop the car. I will not have the beetle crushed. And he flung up his arms in a gesture which Illico and the ivy saw. But the car, an open one, rushed past. The beetle disappeared under the wheel. Illico and the ivy pushed at his poised bow with all his might, and it shot out and downwards exactly in the car's path. Ben plunged after it and did not see the next happening, but there came a jarring sound, and the car rocked, swerved across the road and into the hazel hedge. There, held for a moment by the concealed wire netting, it overhung a 6-foot drop into the field beyond, but the driver had barely scrambled out of his seat and was still clinging to the nearest hazels when the whole hedge collapsed under the weight. There was a crash. The car somersaulted down the slope, and a rocket of flame shot skyward. For an instant, Ben stayed pegged in irresolution to the soft asphalt. Then he ran to the gap and scrambled through. As he did so, he heard a scream of brakes and was aware of a second car pulling up behind him. Smoke packed into his face, and sparks rained on him as he stumbled over the scattered luggage toward the wreck. But he had no knowledge of danger till a flame leapt out at him like an adder and licked up his arm. Then he retreated again in such haste that he nearly knocked down a woman who had suddenly appeared at his elbow. "Help me to pull him clear!" she screamed, fanning the smoke out of his eyes. He saw that she was stooping over the body of the chauffeur who had been carried down in the collapse of the hedge. "I think he's only stunned," shouted the woman, and together they half lifted, half tugged the muttering, groaning creature out of danger. He was conscious of their efforts to try and tried to sit up, only to fall back dizzily against Ben's leg. Ben looked down at him, stooping a little, but not touching, for the face, seen upside down and so close, frightened him. He studied with disgust the fringes of hair on the closed lids, the minute drops of sweat, the pink skin pitted with black. Rooks, he thought, have bare skin round their beaks. Just such skin as this. If you bring your face close to his, thought Ben, a human being is as horrible as a rook. "Was there anyone else in the car?" The woman's voice had lost its hysterical note, but it did not quiet Ben's nerves. It was too warm, too vibrant, too much a pattern of the occasion. He felt himself hemmed in by steamy quiverings of air, fire, action, and emotion. He wanted Illico, but most of all he wanted his hilltop and night. "I passed you," she insisted. "Did you see it passed you?" she insisted. "Did you see anyone?" "A dead branch," mumbled a familiar voice apologetically, and the chauffeur began to struggle to his feet. "It snapped off just in front of me. Car tripped on it, sort of." It was young Peddle. "Help him," said the woman to Ben, and then, as Ben did not at once obey, she gave him a look of surprise that melted richly into appeal. But Ben resented the appeal even more than the command. He gave her a glance which stated that he was a dry stick and out of her sphere. Then he glanced at her a second time, because she was new, and he thought prettily colored. She wore a suit of town tweeds, but under them she was billowy, and she circumvented her tailor with chiffon scarves. She let Ben look her over at his leisure before she addressed him again, and this time with submission. "Don't you think we ought to do something? Could you report the accident? I've got to get back to the Grange." "The Grange? Near a rookery? Then I must be given a lift," said Ben firmly. At the sound of his voice, young Peddle stared for a moment, with bemused yet joyful recognition. "You, sir!" cried Peddle. "So I was right after all. I said to myself, I believe it's him. I said as I was pulling up, only that branch did me in. Might have been burned alive," said young Peddle, glanced at the wreck, shuddered. "Were you alone?" interrupted the woman. "Yes, madam. I am one of the under-chauffeurs up at the Yes, madam. I'm one of the under-chauffeurs up at the castle. Yesterday I'd driven his lordship over." He jerked a vague thumb at the hilltop. "He was in the garden when the bomb dropped." "Don't!" the handsome woman shuddered in her turn with moving exaggeration. "Miss Oleron rang me today. Ghastly business. Yes, ma'am, but the little girl wasn't touched, so his lordship took her off with them and left me behind. Miss Oleron had one of the chauffeurs fetch me today, and I dropped him off to do her errands. Well, I picked up luggage, as had come to the lower station by mistake. Miss Oleron arranged it that way, but now I don't know what I'll do. He gazed with open longing at the smart car. A lift, insisted Ben firmly, and added handsomely, for both of us. The woman lifted her eyebrows, half amused, half annoyed, and scrutinized the pair for a long moment before she said, Where do you want to go? I am to visit, Ben told her, with a last longing glance at Illico's hiding place. A grange near a rookery. The owner's name is Sweat. The bright-eyed petal intervened. Madam here is Miss Sweat. That, said Ben graciously, makes it convenient for us all. And he gestured, the three of them, toward the waiting car. And that's the end of chapter 9.